So with Easter celebrations having just wrapped up this past week around the world, it reminded me a lot of this story that we're going to talk about today. Many have called this story and this series of events as a miracle, a sign from the heavens for humanity about what was about to come. But others have been more inclined to believe that this was actually some sort of alien encounter, and other people claim that it's probably just a hoax or a result of mass hysteria. Regardless, the Vatican has deemed that the events that occurred in this story as something prophetic and a miracle, which has led to over 8 million people visiting the site where these events occurred every single year. This is a story of the Lady of Fatima, but it's also known as the Miracle of the Sun. And as we go along into the story, I want you guys to tell me whether you think this is real, this is fake, or if the truth actually lies somewhere in between. All right, guys, let's get into today's story. Now, quickly, before we get into it, hi, my name is Ashley and I talk about crime, creepy, and unbelievable stories. So if that's your thing, check out my videos on here. I also have a TikTok where I post mostly on a daily basis for a lot more short story format. All of my links are in the description box below. And if you guys enjoy this video or this sort of content, please consider subscribing, commenting, liking, or sharing. It all really does help. Okay, so let's get into the story. Now, this takes us back decades to the year 1916. And we're going to another part of the world, specifically to a town known as Fatima in Portugal, where we meet 3 young children who also happen to be cousins. Francisco, who was 10, Jaquita, who was 9, and Lucia, who was 7. All of which were said to have been from a very poor family of sheep herders. It was the springtime when all 3 of the children were hanging outside together tending to the sheep when a strange man appeared in front of them. They described him as being absolutely beautiful, but also being made of light. Before the children could react, the man ended up approaching them and said, "Do not be afraid, I am the angel of peace." He then invited all 3 children to pray with him, saying that the hearts of Jesus and Mary were listening to the children's prayers. The angel of peace went on to appear again to the children later that summer and continued to urge them to pray, but to also make sacrifices for the sake of their country. The angel also went on to reveal that he was actually also the guardian angel of Portugal. The angel then appeared one more time, and now it was the fall, and this time he was holding a chalice in his hands. There was a host that was floating above the chalice, and small drops of blood could apparently be seen falling from the host into the chalice as the children were watching it float on its own. The angel then started praying, and then he also taught the children a specific prayer known as the Eucharist reparation before giving them a few things. The angel then proceeded to give the floating host to Lucia while he gave the chalice to both Francisco and Jaquita. Then he said the following: "Take and drink the body and blood of Jesus Christ, horribly outraged by ungrateful men. Make reparation for the crimes and the counsel of your God." The angel was then said to have fallen to the ground and recited the prayer 3 more times. And after witnessing that, the children then followed in his footsteps and also started praying for hours on end. However, little did the children know at the time that this was the very beginning of something big. On May 13th, 1917, all 3 children were outside again tending to the sheep in a particular area known as the Cove of Peace, or in Portuguese, it's called La Cova de Iria. They were stunned when there were 2 large flashes of light that took over the sky. All of them looked up and they said that they were greeted a spirit that they would later find out was actually the Virgin Mary. She was said to have been floating in the distance above a very specific bush and was dressed in all white while radiating this glowing white light that they described as being as bright as the sun. One of the children was able to speak to her, and that happened to be Lucia. It's not really understood why the other 2 children were not able to communicate with the Virgin Mary, but all 3 children were able to witness and listen to whatever she had to say. She then tells them the following: "Do not be afraid, I will not harm you, I come from heaven." Before continuing on with her messages, she then asks the children to meet her at the Cove of Peace at the same hour on the 13th day of each month for the next 6 months. She then proceeded to ask the children a very important question. She says to them, "Are you willing to offer yourselves to God and bear all the sufferings He will send to you as an act of reparation for the conversion of sinners?" To which Lucia, on behalf of all of the children, replied, "Yes." The Virgin Mary then replied, "Then you are going to have much to suffer, but the grace of God will be your comfort." And immediately after that, all of the children opened up their hands up above, and a light was said to have penetrated right through them. The children then fell onto the ground and broke into prayer. And one of them said that they felt like they were communicating with the spirit in an almost telepathic message. And they ended up receiving the following: "O most holy Trinity, I adore thee. My God, I love thee in the most blessed sacrament." She then went on to advise the children to pray every single day and to use the rosary in order to bring peace to the world and end all of the world wars. And if you didn't know, World War I was right in the middle of all of this. She also mentioned that all of the children eventually would go to heaven and that they should devote their lives to the Immaculate Heart of Mary before she completely vanished. Not really knowing what to make of this, I know I would probably be completely stunned and unsure what to do in this situation, but the children initially kept this to themselves out of fear about what most of the adults around them would say. Surely, most of the adults would probably chalk this up to childish imaginations, or worse, they could potentially even believe that there was something mentally wrong with the children. However, being little kids, I guess they couldn't really keep the secret to themselves, and word got out. However, their worst fears ended up manifesting because many of the adults right away expressed skepticism, and some of them even started insulting the children. The following month, on June 13th, 1917, the children and approximately 50 people showed up to the Cove of Peace to meet with the Virgin Mary. Right on schedule, she appeared through a bright beam of light. She turned her attention to Lucia and told her the following: "I want you to come on the 13th of next month to pray the rosary every day and to learn to read. I will tell you what I want." She then turned her attention to Gianquinta and Francisco and told them that they would both go to heaven very soon, but that Lucia would be forced to stay on earth to spread the word of God. She also claimed that Gianquinta would pass away alone in a hospital without her family. Hearing this, Lucia was quite worried that she would have to stay here on earth alone. She was quite nervous about this. She was a child after all. To which the Virgin Mary replied that she would never be alone and that God would always be with her. The following month, on July 13th, 1917, the children gathered at the Cove of Peace once again. Mary repeated her message about telling them to pray the rosary every single day in order to attain world peace. She then told the children that in October, she would perform a miracle for all to see and to silence the doubters. In the meantime, she encouraged the children to continue praying and to continue sacrificing themselves for the sins of others. She then revealed 3 very important secrets that would go on to make people question the validity of this story and to make people wonder what was really waiting for humanity. Mary then opened her hands and a bright beam of light exposed itself to everyone there and revealed a very disturbing vision to the children. It was a scene from hell. They described it as being full of demons, lost souls, suffering unimaginable torture. And this would end up being the first of the 3 secrets. The second secret basically predicted the end of World War I. Like I said, World War I was happening at the same time all of this occurred. And it also carried a prediction of the beginning of World War II. She then went on to warn the children that if humans did not stop war, that hell would essentially break loose, and that's exactly what would become of Earth in the form of World War II. She then went on to say that Russia would be saved and that it would be turned into a place of peace and prayer if the kids continued to pray and were able to successfully spread the message that she was giving to them. But if they did not succeed, then Russia would essentially spread her wings and cause world wars, followed by the persecution of the church. Essentially, this was later translated as being a prediction of the rise and fall of communism. Let me know what you guys think about that. The third secret was a vision of the Pope losing his life as he was passing by a crowd of hundreds of people and hundreds of bodies that had been unfortunately martyred. The vision then shows the Pope falling to the ground and then gunfire being heard in the distance. And later on, many people would kind of lead this or trace this to being a prediction of World War III if the world did not solidify their faith in God. Others, though, believe that this particular vision was foreshadowing the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II in 1981, which is a whole other story that you could do a huge deep dive on. However, this third secret was not revealed to the public until the year 2000. So you see, the children had not been authorized to reveal the third secret until they were able to do so. In 1943, Lucia ended up becoming extremely ill, and there was a lot of concern that she might pass away with this secret. So essentially, the bishop told her to reveal the secret in case the worst situation ended up manifesting. However, she was quite hesitant about this, and she was adamant that she did not have permission, and she also said that she did not believe that humanity was ready for the third secret. However, she did agree to meet the bishop in the middle, and she ended up writing the secret down on a piece of paper and put it in a sealed envelope and told him to not open it until 1960. In 1960, the Vatican issued a press release stating that the secret would remain sealed forever, which led to worldwide speculation about what it could possibly be. In 2000, Pope John Paul II did decide to release the secret to the public, which is what led everyone to tie the two events together to the failed assassination of himself in 1981. The following month, on August 13th, something more unexpected happened. Now, by this time, a lot more people had heard about the visits, including a lot of naysayers and anti-secular publications. This led to the kidnapping of the 3 children on the morning of the 13th by the mayor Villanova de Urem, Arturo Santos. He then interrogated the children and essentially told them that he thought they were lying about the entire thing. He essentially wanted the kids to confess to their misdeeds, but all of them completely refused to say anything that contradicted the truth. All of the children would later go on to say that they would rather pass away than choose to lie because they knew that Mary had entrusted them with very important information. And 2 days later, on August 15th, the children were released. Several days later, on August 19th, Mary appeared to the children in another town called Valinos. She then again told them to continue praying with the rosary and to continue making sacrifices, and reiterated her promise of a miracle that was to come in October. It was safe to say by this point that the message was crystal clear to the children. They knew exactly what their mission was on Earth. And it was said that the children would pray and pray for hours on end. They would go days without drinking water. They would sacrifice themselves. They would give food to other people that were hungrier than they were, even though these kids did come from a very poor family. And to kind of sacrifice themselves to the fullest extent, they actually ended up tying a rope around their wrists in order to create pain and I guess some sort of scuffing or cutting into their skin as a form of penance. The next month, on September 13th, the children and a very large group of people gathered around the cove at noon. Like all previous times, a big flash of light took over the sky and then Mary appeared. She again spoke to Lucia and said, "Continue to pray the rosary in order to obtain the end of the war. In October, our Lord will come as well as Our Lady of Sorrows and Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Saint Joseph will appear with the child of Jesus to bless the world. God is pleased with your sacrifices." And then she vanished. Finally, the day had arrived that everyone had been waiting for. It was now October 13th, 1917, and everyone was waiting for this supposed miracle. Word had spread across the entire country, and people started to descend to the Cove of Peace in Fatima in droves. Many believers took it as an opportunity to participate in a sort of pilgrimage, walking barefoot and reciting the rosary as they made their way to Fatima. It had also been raining on that particular day. It was said to have been a torrential downpour, but that did not stop people from wanting to witness this miracle. And around noon, the children ended up arriving right on time for the flash of light. Mary then begins to speak and again, like always, addresses her comments to Lucia. She says to her, "I want to tell you that a chapel is to be built here in my honor. I am the Lady of the Rosary. Continue to pray always the Rosary every day. The war is going to end and the soldiers will soon return to their homes." She then opened her hands and ascended into the sky. Her light met with the sun's, and then she disappeared as the miracle began. Quite literally, the sun began to dance in the sky. It zigzagged and whirled around and bounced around in the sky as it started casting colors down onto the crowds of people below. It then descended towards the earth, causing all 70,000 people to scream, thinking that the sun was literally going to collide with the earth and that this was basically the end of time. The entire ordeal took about 10 minutes before the sun returned to normal. Suddenly, the wind began to howl quite loudly, but the odd thing here is that not a single leaf on a tree was moving. Those who had been caught in the torrential downpour earlier suddenly were completely dry, and so was the ground beneath them, and there was absolutely no way to explain this. Many of the people who also suffered from physical and mental ailments had also been cured in the days following the miracle. And after that, it was also reported that there were countless numbers of people going to local churches in order to confess their sins. But this is where we start to question and wonder whether this entire thing was real or if there was some sort of other explanation. So right away, it was reported that this miracle of the sun was not just seen by the 70,000 spectators right below it, but it was also seen in several towns that were up to 25 miles away from Fatima, which immediately ruled out hallucination and mass hysteria. Nothing like this had ever been reported anywhere in the world, regardless of how many people came forward claiming that they had witnessed the miracle. Skeptics still remained. So one thing that bothered me about this story, and as I was doing my research, is that there was press at this event, both secular and anti-secular press, because the word had spread basically across the country at this point. So people wanted to document what they could of this miracle. And I did come across multiple photos that the press took of the crowd standing there looking up at the sky. You can see that something has everyone's attention. But what bothers me about this is that not a single person took a photo of the sky. And if they did, there hasn't been any publication of it yet. So I'm not sure if these photos are being hidden, if they just were not released, or if there was simply no miracle and that's why there was no photo taken of the sun dancing in the sky. So the following year in 1918, unfortunately, Francisco became quite ill with influenza, and although he had initially made a recovery, he ended up passing away on April 4th, 1919, very early on in his life, just as the Virgin Mary had predicted. The same winter of 1918, Gianquinta fell sick with pneumonia, and she was then moved to a hospital in a neighboring town in July of 1919. She underwent very painful treatments, but was forced to return home with a very big open wound. In January of 1920, she was then taken to another hospital, but this time in Lisbon, where she was diagnosed with diseased ribs. And unfortunately, she would never recover from this illness, and she would go on to pass away on February 20th, 1920, alone in the hospital, just as Mary had predicted. Both her body and Francisco's body were buried at the basilica that was built at the Cove of Peace in Fatima. As for Lucia, she went on to live in another town called Porto in Portugal, so she wouldn't be essentially harassed or hounded with all of these questions. Eventually, she would go on to become a nun before joining the Carmelites, and she would go on to live a very long life until 2005 when she passed away at the age of 97. Both Francisco and Gianquinta were canonized, but Lucia's process is still ongoing since she did pass away at a much later date. So this brings me back to my initial question. What was this? Was it truly a miracle? Was it a hoax? Or was it something in between? Scientists put forward the idea that this was merely a result of people just looking into the sunlight for way too long, and essentially they were just seeing things in the sky. However, others believe that this could have very well have been an alien encounter in disguise. One popular explanation that I've seen floating around is that the sun moving around in the sky was actually a flying saucer, and that the colors everyone saw in the sky were literally just the beams of lights coming from this spaceship alien craft. This story was then given a little bit more of a push when witness stories started coming forward about them saying that they saw some sort of disc-shaped object in the sky that was moving around, which many people initially confused to be the sun. Although 70,000 people allegedly did witness this entire miracle happen right in front of their eyes, as well as the neighboring towns up to 25 miles away, people across the world who also had sunlight at that point in time did not report any such incident at all. However, could it have been possible for the sun to behave in one way for a certain group of people, but act completely normal for the rest of the world? As for the Virgin Mary appearing to the children, many believe that this could have very well just been an alien in disguise or appearing in a form that would have been less threatening, especially to young children. A man named Dr. Johannes Feibag looked into the UFO theory as well, and his belief is that the Virgin Mary was likely some sort of hologram projection that was used by advanced civilizations. So if you entertain this idea, I'm sure it would probably lead you to ask, well, why would such an important message that basically could change the path of humanity, why would something so important be delivered to young children? Well, my personal best guess would be because children are more likely to be less skeptical than adults. They haven't necessarily been jaded by the world, and they could probably be a lot more easily convinced to spread such a message to the world without much hassle. Now, this particular theory actually reminds me of another story that took place in the 90s in Zimbabwe. And I actually covered this story quite a while ago. I'll link it up here somewhere if you guys are interested in that video. But essentially, a group of school children in Zimbabwe were greeted with aliens that were basically there to give the children a message for humanity. Essentially, the message said that humans needed to be more responsible with the way they were treating Earth, and especially with the technology they were using at the time, because otherwise it would essentially begin the downfall of humans and the Earth would cease to live. But again, that is a very long story. If you guys want to watch it, I'll link it up here and it's in my description box below. Then there's also the story of the Buff Ledge encounter, where two teenagers were given a very important message about human consciousness. Again, I will also link it up here for you guys. But my point here is that UFOs have allegedly been documented appearing to children multiple times in the past, and not just in one specific area, but in different parts of the world with important messages. So it makes me wonder whether or not this could potentially be the same case. So as we move on to the third secret and the speculation surrounding it, I want you guys to tell me what you think the third secret could have truly been. So like I said, it was initially kept a secret for decades and decades after Lucia had written it on the piece of paper, and even after she had given permission for it to have been revealed. But why would the Vatican need to keep such an important secret for humans a secret? Once the secret was revealed in 2000, it was widely believed that the Vatican had apparently altered the message, and that the true secret actually had something to do with the apocalypse, specifically the chapters 8 through 13. And for reference, this is the part of the Bible that talks about the three angels and their trumpets signifying the end of the world. So that kind of begs the question, did the Vatican keep an apocalyptic message a secret in order to avoid mass hysteria? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. So where does that leave us today? Well, today there is a church or a chapel of apparitions that rests where the Virgin Mary would appear, and it also serves as a place of worship to over 8 million people who visit the town of Fatima every single year, mostly between the months of May and October when the sightings took place. And even Pope Francis made a pilgrimage to the site in May of 2017 to mark the 100-year anniversary of the entire thing, which only added fuel to the fire that this was truly a miracle from God and not a hoax. But again, I leave it up to you guys. Let me know what you think. Was this a miracle from God? Was this a message that was meant to be delivered from God to humans? Was this aliens with an important message potentially appearing as something less intimidating? Or was it just a result of some sort of mass hysteria? Or was it just a complete hoax? Let me know what you guys think, and thank you so much for joining me on this video. Again, if you guys enjoyed it, please consider commenting, liking, subscribing. Everything really helps, and I will see you guys in the next video.